Discussions about Putin's possible removal from office have been brewing since the beginning of hostilities in Ukraine. Many people believed that it would become a serious trigger for society, but so far nothing happened. That being said, we shouldn't completely write this possibility off. In this video, we will discuss if Putin can be deposed and who has the power to do that. In Russia's case, there are two main ways to overthrow a leader: national revolution and coup d'etat. Let's talk about the latter first. Why can it happen? Putin's so-called special operation was denounced by all developed countries in the world, most of which imposed sanctions against Russia. These sanctions are unprecedented in world history. Today, Russia has more sanctions than Iran, which puts it in first place. Restrictions on financial transactions, bank operations, and trade with Russia worry quite a lot of people in power. Such drastic changes alarmed many deputies, officials, oligarchs, and the government leadership as a whole, as it severely impeded their income. Status quo allowed them to earn money in Russia through a variety of ways and then transfer it offshore where it would be safe. Since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, they are no longer able to do that. Furthermore, many of the officials and oligarchs were struck by individual sanctions, prohibiting them from entering Western countries where their accounts and property were arrested. The majority of the elites are dissatisfied with the current state of affairs. So Putin, his policies, and his view of Russia's future no longer resonate with them. Plus, lately Putin has been cracking down on elites, which makes them nervous, especially after a series of losses that the Russian army has suffered in Ukraine, incapable of occupying Kiev. Since the beginning of the conflict, the government has been taking a tougher stance, which affects both the general populace and Putin's elite. Different sources report that some generals and FSB personnel were arrested. They are being accused of corruption and collaborating with Ukrainian intelligence. These repressions could get worse with time. That is why elites are not only risking losing their wealth, but their freedom and life as well, which might increase their motivation to overthrow the regime. Who can pull off such a coup? Keep in mind that the regime was built very carefully, and Putin is highly concerned with his own safety at all times. He surrounded himself with yes-men who are used to agreeing with whatever he says, and every opposing political figure has been dealt with a long time ago. The Federal Protective Service is loyal to the regime and they guard the president non-stop. However, Russian higher-ups have plenty of powerful people and agencies which could, with proper planning and motivation, remove Putin from office. First of all, it is the Federal Security Service, led by Alexander Bortnikov. He has enough power to go against Putin. Historically, the FSB agency always had a lot of sway in Russia. According to some Western intelligence departments, the FSB is already being repressed due to the losses in Ukraine. Military intelligence service with Igor Kostikov could also be a threat to Putin's regime. Other agencies that could go against Putin include the Foreign Intelligence Service led by Naryshkin, Russian National Guard led by Zolotov, as well as Shoigu and Gerasimov in charge of the Russian army. And of course, let's not forget about the Federal Protective Service itself, led by Dmitry Kochnev. Together, they have the power necessary to overthrow Putin. They can do it in a number of ways, from imprisonment to forcing his resignation due to illness, or prohibiting him from making any actual decisions while still keeping him as a president. However, it all comes down to their loyalty to Putin and whether or not they actually want to replace him. Military agencies support the special operation, but its continuation and consequences might change their opinion in the future. If it does come to pass, what happens next? Putin's potential removal through a coup can result in a variety of scenarios. The most probable one would maintain the power structure while changing leadership or switching to a collegial model. This scenario would blame all the problems of the current regime and the conflict in Ukraine on Putin alone. This might lead to a power struggle between elites, as it happened in USSR after Lenin and Stalin passed away. But even this scenario could lead to a so-called thaw, just like the one that happened when Khrushchev came to power after Stalin. While still maintaining a totalitarian government during his rule, Khrushchev loosened the grip and freed political prisoners. The second scenario would be a national revolution with civil unrest in bigger cities. Such an event could be triggered by the same issues that can cause a coup discussed earlier. Since the launch of the military operation, Russia became partially isolated from the world's most developed countries. They were important for import and export. Economic pressure is escalating with each passing day. According to some reports, Russia's GDP can fall by 10 to 15%. And in the long run, the economy would go on a downswing. This situation can lead to massive economic problems inside the country. Prices for necessity goods are going up, a wave of unemployment is coming as companies are shutting down, some goods might run out completely, and foreign technologies will become unobtainable. This will heavily affect the people. First and foremost, this will lead to middle class growing poor. How can this revolution happen? The growing discontent can result in mass spontaneous protests without clear leadership or even political organizations. We should note that Putin is afraid of color revolutions, and in the last few years has been doing everything to prevent them. Russia's political power is held only by loyalists, and opposing parties had been ignored for a long time. They were not allowed to participate in elections and were completely crushed not too long ago. Independent media outlets were declared foreign agents and shut off. Western social networks, such as Twitter and Facebook, are being blocked, which could impede protest coordination. At the same time, Russian police has been beefed up significantly, making any public gathering or protest nearly impossible. Riots in Russia can end up the same way they did in Belarus, with hard pushback from authorities and mass repressions amongst the populace. We should not dismiss this possibility, especially in the wake of a nearing economic crisis and prolonged armed conflict. What would happen if this comes to pass? A national revolution can lead to several scenarios. First of all, it could happen along with a coup d'etat. That is, if elites realize that Putin's regime became so unpopular that it caused mass riots. That way, a part of the elites can support them and replace Putin. Something similar happened during the February Revolution, when Nikolai II was forced to abdicate, not only because of civil unrest, but due to elites betraying him as well. In part, this was also caused by an ongoing war and a weakened economy. In this scenario, the Russian government could appease the rioters while still keeping its structure. In another scenario, the revolution might lead to democratization, same way it happened in Spain and Portugal. If a part of law enforcement agencies support the masses, that would increase the chances of success. Democratization would destroy the current regime and lead to a complete state reform. The third and the most negative scenario for Russia would be a red revolution and the following instability across the entire country. Riots can both change the Kremlin regime and destabilize other regions. Even though separatism is unheard of in modern-day Russia, it's possible that riots could spark it in some of the national republics. To sum up, we can say that overthrowing Putin can be achieved with two main scenarios, with a coup or a national revolution. Each method has its own limitations, and they are both unlikely to happen. A coup would not change the country's power structure, and a national revolution could lead to serious consequences for Russia, both positive and negative. Please consider subscribing to the channel, as well as becoming a supporter on Patreon or YouTube. Many thanks to those who already support us.